Thank you so much. This was the most wonderful introduction I've ever been to.
The most memorable.
Most memorable, and I wish the introduction continued for some more time. And thank you again, Don. A very, very dear and good friend for a long, long time. I'm going to speak on the kind of ethical pluralism that has been promoted in a famous work called, in short, the Gita, but the full name, the complete name of that word is, as it is put here, Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So it is the same work. And according to the Library of Congress records, that keeps track of all publications in the world, this work, Gita, is the most translated work in the world. It has been translated into more languages than any other work, and it has been translated more often than any other work. That is according to the Library of Congress records. And in this work, we have a kind of ethical pluralism that is very uncommon. We are here to discuss ethical implications of globalization's impact on targeted countries, generally education, culture. We have chosen some countries, but these issues are quite general, and they apply to different countries all across the globe. And for that, to study ethical implications, of course, ethical theories are very important. It is my position that we need a kind of inclusivism in different academic areas, different academic fields, to be able to study the ethical implications of globalization's impact. Not exclusivism, not narrow-mindedness, not one-sidedness, but a kind of broad, inclusive approach. Now, it is not usually recognized that moral philosophies that are supposed to be giving us the kind of insight that we need to promote equality, to promote tolerance, and promote pluralism, sometimes can be also promoting exclusivism of a sort. And this is what I want to talk about today. In my opinion, we should face and address exclusivism even in the field of morality, where it is less recognized. And because it gives us, supposed to give us the kind of insight we need to promote justice, fairness, equality of all. So in my opinion, exclusivism in the field of moral philosophy is still quite harmful because of the special role it has. So that is my main topic today, to argue for pluralism in the field of morality, which I think is very important for studying the ethical implications of globalization's impact on education culture in not only the targeted countries, but all around the globe. So before I get into the kind of ethical pluralism that is promoted in the Gita, I would like to touch on, to give you the background why I think it is so important, three main Western ethical theories. Three main Western ethical theories. And that will hopefully give you the reason to think, to appreciate why pluralism in the field of ethics also is so important. The kind of exclusivism that is found in these great, very, very influential Western ethical theories that I want to bring out first. So first, I would mention the great theory of Kant, deontological perspective in ethics, which promotes duty for the sake of duty, regardless of the consequences. And according to Kant, moral imperatives like one should tell the truth are a priori completely independent of experience, absolutely categorical, absolutely unconditional, and admit of no exceptions under any situation whatsoever. Very famous deontological theory of Kant. Now, such a viewpoint I'm labeling as an exclusive viewpoint in morality. The deontological perspective I'm labeling as an exclusive viewpoint because it tries to exclude other ethical perspectives, such as consequentialism, such as utilitarianism, such as the virtue theory. That is why I'm labeling it as exclusive. And that is what, and these other theories also are exclusive in my opinion, like the consequentialist theory, the utilitarian theory, the virtue theory. So it is not just the deontological theory. So what I'm searching for is a theory, an ethical perspective, in order to study the ethical implications of globalization's impact, which will be more broad-based, which will not be exclusive. So what will be a difficulty, a serious difficulty in that kind of perspective that Kant gives us in deontological ethics? I will mention only one. And this is adopted from an example given by Kant himself. So we cannot make any exceptions to moral imperatives. No exceptions, under no circumstances, in Kant's view. But now suppose there is in Hitler's Germany, let me go back to Hitler's Germany, a Nazi officer is knocking at your door and asking you about the whereabouts of a Jewish family you have kindly given shelter to them in your basement. Should you tell the truth? What will happen then? Most likely they will be beheaded. You too, because you have housed them, you have given them shelter. In Kant's view, you should tell the truth, even in a situation like that. In my view, that is too extreme a position. This is one of the dangers of exclusivism, even in the field of morality. Let me pass on to another very, very influential Western ethical theory, which is utilitarianism. Developed by Bentham, Mill, etc. And I may say that serves as a foundation for American, American civilization, which is, in a sense, a very, very influential, dominant viewpoint in the world today. So the utilitarian viewpoint is very, very influential and powerful. And in my opinion, that too is an exclusive approach, particularly in such fields as minority rights. It is very nice, it is very useful to talk about being beneficial, doing things that are beneficial to as great number of people. But how about peoples and groups that are small? Should we also not protect them from discrimination and preserve their rights? Unfortunately, the utilitarian viewpoint does not provide sufficient moral base to protect minority rights, because you can violate them as long as, even from the moral point of view, as long as it is promoting the greater goodness of the greater number. That, I think, is a major problem of the utilitarian perspective, which is probably the most influential ethical theory since the time of Bentham and Mill and our time today. But that is a very serious difficulty in that viewpoint. The other big ethical theory, very influential today, is from Aristotle. The virtue theory of Aristotle that focuses on building a strong character by building good habits, by making the right choices, virtuous choices, as Aristotle would put them, that are rational choices, that are trying to choose the golden mean, avoiding the extremes, avoiding the excesses, not going for too much, not going for too little, try to stay in the middle. this kind of approach to ethics also, in my view, is kind of exclusive. Why? Because in some situations, some choices that for many would be morally right may be excluded by always trying to stick to the golden mean, as Aristotle put it. I will give you an example. Suppose there is a very popular freedom fighter, and he is very influential, or she is very influential, and the despotic ruler is trying to get his or her help by offering him or her so many things, lots of money, lots of privileges, and also assuring that if he or she agrees to come along and play the game, then that ruler, that despotic ruler, will do a bunch of things, good things, for people. But it will still be at a high cost. It will still be at a high moral cost. And suppose this freedom fighter turns it down and then gets executed by this despotic ruler. So the result is that none of those things that the ruler was willing to offer, as good measures for people, will now take place, because the bargain is over. Now, in Aristotelian perspective, that freedom fighter has made an extreme choice, and therefore it is an immoral choice. This, in my view, is very questionable and is still an exclusive approach in ethics. So, I've touched very briefly. Now, all these theories are great ethical theories, and each one of them has many excellent scholars writing on them and defending them, and will be quite willing to respond to the critiques I have offered. But I really don't have the time to go into a proper discussion of all of them. What I propose to do in the little time I have is try to throw light on this very difficult issue. You see, I am not aware of any substantive discussion on the kind of ethical pluralism. There is an endless number of literature on the Gita, in English, in French, in German. As I said, the Gita, according to the Library of Congress records, is the most translated book in the world, ever. So, endless literature, secondary literature. But still, obviously I have not exhausted all of the secondary literature, it's impossible. But at least I am not aware of any substantive discussion of this kind of ethical pluralism, which I think is important, because it is important to recognize exclusivism in the field of morality, which is our watchdog, which is supposedly our watchdog, supposedly to give us the insight, to deal with oppression, to deal with discrimination, to promote. So exclusivism in the field of moral philosophy, in my view, is quite harmful. And that is what I am trying to argue against. So my take on this is inspired by a very famous episode in this work called the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as I said, Gita in short. And I take it that all of us are aware of this introductory part of the Gita, where, so I will go through it very quickly, where the commander-in-chief of one side of the army, his name is Arjuna, refuses to fight in a war which is about to ensue, because on the other side, among his opponents are included his direct teachers, his elders, people whom he respects and people who have helped him to be who has been, to whom he is so deeply indebted, and of course many others who are innocent. So Arjuna lays down his arms and says, I would rather get killed by my opponents than fight in a war like this. But then Krishna, who in the Hindu perspective is a divine incarnation, so supposed to be someone who should be doing things that is moral and avoid things that are immoral, That is part of our perception of God, very commonly found in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Islamic tradition as well. So, Krishna is urging him actually to fight and kill. And Krishna gives some reasons to Arjuna. Krishna points out that this is a virtuous war. This war has become necessary because all negotiations that have been going on for a long, long time have failed. And without this, the oppressive, tyrannical ruler cannot be unseated, cannot be removed from power, and you are the person who can do this. You are the great warrior who can do this. If you don't, people will continue to be under this very, very oppressive and tyrannical rule. So you must do this for common good. Loka Sangraha is the Sanskrit word, common good. This is one of the key reasons that Krishna gives to Arjuna to fight, to kill. Not only to kill, but also to kill people whom he respects deeply, from whom, to whom he is so deeply indebted. Loka Sangraha, common good. Krishna justifies a war on that ground, which is a consequentialist argument. But he also draws attention to Arjuna that you are here as a soldier. It is your duty to fight. It is the duty of a soldier to fight. And duty is for the sake of duty, Krishna claims, regardless of the consequences. So he gives the common good reason, but he also gives the duty for the sake of duty reason. Karmani eva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadati. Never the consequences, never. So that's a very strong deontological perspective. So side by side with the consequentialist one, common good, duty for the sake of duty, regardless of the consequences. And then Krishna also tells Arjuna that you must act from a very, very strong, unwavering character. That is like a lamp shining in a windless place, never flickers this way, that way. You must be like that. Your character must be like that. It must be virtuous and steady and stable. And you must also follow the lead of the wise. What the wise have done before you. Now these are all ingredients of Aristotle's virtue theory, following the lead of the wise, building a virtuous character. So the character is the most important thing in Aristotle's virtue theory. And Krishna is using a similar argument from the virtue theory perspective, as I pointed out, from the consequentialist perspective, from the deontological perspective. So, what has happened is that this very influential work has inspired, unknown to moral philosophers of today, a very vast literature on ethical theories. Mostly, nearly 98-99% still untranslated. It's very vast, like not 10-20 volumes in Sanskrit, but not hundreds of volumes, but literally, many thousand volumes in Sanskrit on this kind of literature, influenced by the Gita, where they are discussing deontological theories, sort of, or consequentialist theories, sort of, or virtue theories, sort of, but not quite in the exclusive way it is done by the Western moral philosophers, who claim that these are in a sense incompatible theories. That if you argue for one, you should reject the other. This is not how the classical Indian moral philosophers, who have produced this extremely large literature in Sanskrit, mostly unknown, almost unknown, and untranslated. I'm drawing your attention to that, and I'll argue very briefly for that. So how much time do I have now left?
You have 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, I'll try to summarize. Yeah, it's a big subject. So 20 minutes. And I would also like to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. I'll be very thankful and grateful if you offer your insights and comments. So that is where I'm taking off. That it seems that Krishna is pushing for a pluralistic perspective. It is well known that he has pushed very explicitly for a pluralistic perspective in faith. His approach, to spirituality, this is better known. There is not much discussion of the kind of ethical pluralism that I claim he is promoting in the Gita. No substantive discussion that I am aware of. But there is discussion of the kind of religious pluralism that is found in the Gita. Because he is saying explicitly, Yo yathamam prapadyante tang sathaiva bhajamyaham, which means whoever worships in whichsoever way. Think of these words. Whoever worships, prays, in whichsoever way is saved. Tang sathaiva bhajami aham. Whoever worships in whichsoever way. Krishna is not saying that this is the only right way for spiritual progress. No. Whoever, in which, yo yatha, these are absolutely broad pronouns. Who, yo yatha. So this is better known. The kind of religious inclusivism that is promoted in the Gita is much better known than the kind of ethical pluralism that Krishna is also promoting. No substantial literature on the ethical pluralism there. And I think it is important to recognize exclusivism in the field of moral philosophy as well, not just in the field of faith. It is very important, of course, to recognize exclusivism in the field of religion and faith, which is extremely dangerous. And we all know what kind of price we are paying for that, the kind of exclusivism in the field of faith. So I will argue for ethical pluralism. First of all, if it makes sense to speak of religious inclusivism, can we also be, on rational grounds, exclusive in the field of morality? Are these completely separate compartments, completely divorced, religion, faith from morality? I don't think so. I don't think there is any substantive reason to completely demarcate and separate religion from morality. Religion and morality, in my view, are completely, totally interrelated and intertwined, absolutely inseparable. What kind of life we should live, what is good, and what kind of devotion we have, what kind of prayers we do, what kind of, they are completely inseparable, in my view. So if inclusivism is to be adopted in the field of faith, if we think that interfaith dialogue and understanding is very important, then inclusivism, in my opinion, should also be very important in the field of morality. And we should try to get away from the exclusive approaches in the ethical theories I have mentioned, claiming that the other ethical theories are wrong. They are not necessarily incompatible. That is my position. And that is, I think, the position that has been developed in the Gita, and more explicitly, obviously, developed by the philosophers that have produced, as I mentioned, thousands of, writings in Sanskrit, almost unknown, almost all untranslated. Their approach is an inclusive one. They do not think that the virtue theory approach, the deontological approach, the consequentialist approach are necessarily, exclusive. They think that they can be combined. And I'll try to argue for that in the remaining time, very briefly again. It's a very, very large subject, but I think very, very important and not discussed. to my knowledge, no substantive discussion of this point of view available so far. Now, one argument I shall offer for this inclusive viewpoint is that these different approaches in morality, as well as these different approaches to spirituality and faith, can be linked to, as it has been argued in the Gita itself and many other words, to different traits. Three main traits in this perspective of ethical pluralism on which they are based. Different approaches based on basic human traits. These are known as, in Sanskrit, first of all, and then I will translate them roughly for you, the sattva trait, the rajas, and tamas. Sattva roughly cognitivity, the desire to know, to learn, to remove ignorance. Dynamism, rajas, the drive that pushes us to get things done, to overcome difficulties. Dynamism, rajas. And tamas, affectivity, our pleasures, our pains, our sympathies, our love. These, in the Gita perspective, and also as supported by these thousands of Sanskrit authors, are the three main traits, sattva, rajas and tamas: cognitivity, dynamism and affectivity, on which these are parts of our nature. This is who we are. We are in part cognitive people, we are in part dynamic people, and we are in part affective people. So these approaches are based on who we are, our basic nature. This is a very major argument for this perspective. So, in this view, obviously they are not incompatible, because this is who we are, this is our total personality, and if they were incompatible, we could not even function as human beings, as one person. The very fact that we do shows that cognitivity does not exclude dynamism or affectivity. So this is a very key argument, linking these different approaches, both in spirituality as well as in morality, to three different character traits that makes them so well-founded, irreversibly founded in human nature itself. The other main argument I shall offer for this approach is that this also helps us in a way. The time is short, so I cannot get into the real details, to resolve and address some of these difficulties in these major Western ethical theories that I pointed out. How can we address them? That is also a very important question in moral philosophy. Kantian theory is open to this, as I claimed. Very serious difficulty. The utilitarian theory is open to very serious difficulty. Minority rights, at least in today's world, are, if we go back some time, they were systematically, overlooked and trampled, minority rights. But hopefully, I can claim that in the world today, minority rights have more protection. Hopefully I'm right and you will agree with me that it is now recognized that it is very important and necessary on the part of the government, on the part of any developed society, to respect and honor and give full protection to the minorities. So, if I am right, then this critique of utilitarianism is also a very pertinent criticism, because in my opinion it will fail to safeguard minority rights. But this approach, when you link these approaches in ethics to basic character traits, can help you to combine these seemingly competing ethical theories. We don't have to be confined to just one of them to the exclusion of the other. We can just look at who we are and how we function, and then try to address these difficulties by bringing them into a cohesive model. So from the Kantian perspective, the difficulty, why should we not look at the consequences? Where is the philosophical reason to disregard the consequences? We should. There is no reason to be that, indifferent to experience. Kant's approach was that moral perspectives are totally independent of experience. But morality has to do with our life. How to live a good life, here and now, today. How can we totally forget and ignore experience for that? So this approach in the Gita, of course, says that Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, should combine Karma Yoga, the path of action. You may have heard of these very famous expressions like Jnana Yoga, the approach through knowledge, Karma Yoga, the approach through action, and of course Bhakti Yoga, the approach through devotion, to faith, obey God, the Creator. God has given to each one of us everything we have. We must surrender completely. This is Bhakti Yoga, the path of faith. So, if that makes sense, by founding them on the basic traits of human nature, my claim is that ethical pluralism also makes sense, and it helps us to address these serious difficulties in these major Western theories, ethical theories, because it allows you now to take into account experience and reason both while dealing with moral choices. Of course, character is very important. We must build, as Aristotle says. But that should not be the only decisive factor. It is important, but there are cases where consequences also must be taken into account, where duties also must be taken into account and given full recognition while making moral decisions. So, this approach found in the Gita, by advocating a kind of pluralism, allows us to do that and allows us to somehow address some of the difficulties that I pointed out in these major ethical theories that, in my opinion, have provided an exclusive approach to morality. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
So, to questions. So, I guess we'll start with Cosimo.
Thank you. Thank you. Showed us the basics, not something sophisticated, not the secondary literature, no, but the basics. Thank you for that. First of all. Also, my question is that the word that you used frequently is inclusiveness. Inclusiveness. Now, the adjective inclusive. And that word is quite fashionable today. I think that all of you are aware of it. But I think that there could be a misunderstanding, a confusion. And that is what I have to do, to give you a little details about it. Ask the question, if it is important or necessary to make a distinction within that inclusiveness concept. I read that, for instance, many things. I'm interested in many things. Aztec religion, the ancient Mesoamerican religion, where they sacrificed 2,000 people every month. And now in Wikipedia and the others, they are hiding that aspect and saying that Aztec were wise administrators and blah, blah, blah. Also about India. I read that, different from what I read decades ago, the goddess Kali was a good goddess, and there were not human sacrifices. And also Thomas Cromwell, not to be confused with Thomas More, he used to be the villain, the bad guy, when I was young. And now, cancel culture, the in the recent British TV series, the good guy is Thomas Cromwell, actually the persecutor of Thomas More, and Thomas More became the bad guy. The examples. So when you spoke about inclusiveness, so and pluralism of ethical views, you said duty, for instance, from Kant. And your example is of a soldier. Krishna say, perform your duty as a soldier, not a duty as a cartel pusher of drugs, member. Also utility. The greater good, if that tyrant had taken the good leaders in his administration, the greater good. Not the greater good for without those good leaders. And as for character, you spoke about the strenuous fight of a leader for political freedom against the tyrant, not the character of those young German boys of Hitlerjugend saying, "Heil Hitler!" and throwing themselves under the tanks of Soviet Union soldiers. Not the design. Why? Because today, inclusiveness is relativism. I'm sure that you know that ethical theory coming from Protagoras in ancient Greece. Relativism. Everything is good. Everything is fine. Everything. The duty of the strenuous fighter for freedom, and also the duty of the Hitlerjugend member, and so on. So I think that relativism forgets the three basic features you mentioned: knowledge, strength, and love of activity. That interpretation of inclusiveness is not yours. What do you think?
Thank you, Professor Muning, for this very, very useful comment. Bringing up the issue of ethical relativism. I have a paper here that I didn't read since the time is so short, but a large section of this paper is devoted to the question of ethical relativism and how to distinguish it from ethical pluralism. I'm not arguing for ethical relativism. Ethical relativism is dangerous, must be rejected. I'm not arguing that anything goes or anything is right or anything is no, that is not my position. That is not the position of the Gita as well. Pluralism does not mean relativism. You still have standards. You still have the great standards of duty. You still have the great standards of the consequences. And you still have the great standards of character. So obviously relativism is completely ruled out by the standard of character, and of course in the light of consequences, and of course in the light of duty as well. So I thank you for your question, but I think this approach should be completely distinguished from ethical relativism.
Tommy?
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa, for your interesting and important presentation. I think that it's really fascinating an aspect in Bhagavad Gita that it in a way seems to include ethical arguments that in a way combine or in a way include all of these great ethical traditions you were referring to, namely the ontological, utilitarian and virtue ethical traditions. And it's really a word of studying in greater detail that how these different ethical aspects are really combined or included in the Gita. One might perhaps say that, or might suggest that perhaps it's somehow question of situational ethics or ethics in which we should pay attention to certain kind of case-specific characteristics of ethical evaluations. I'm not saying that the Bhagavad Gita is or representing situational ethics, but somehow it sounds that one of the implications you were referring to might include also that sort of ideas, that perhaps kind of case specificity and situationality is included in the Bhagavad Gita teaching on ethical issues. But another thing is that the story or the stories in the Bhagavad Gita, they are extremely rich, and one important part or section or sections in the Bhagavad Gita seems in a way advocate a view in which or it seems that Krishna in a way represents the idea that one might call deterministic. Namely, he says to Arjuna that even if Arjuna declined to follow the advice to continue fighting, Arjuna will fight anyway. And this kind of determinism is a kind of additional aspect that makes things even more complex from an ethical point of view. Or what do you think?
Now, thank you, Tommy. This is, of course, I've known Tommy for a long, long time. He is an excellent Gita scholar in his own right. I should point that out. And he has raised a very, very pertinent question about the role that determinism and morality do not go together. If everything we do is predetermined, how can we be held responsible? How can we be blamed if I have no choice in making these decisions, if I am already predetermined? For morality, freedom is absolutely crucial. And this is why many philosophers find it necessary to critique materialism. Because in their perspective, materialism leaves no room for freedom. There is no, in the world of physics, everything is predictable, everything is determined. That is the foundation of physics, all physical sciences. Now, we are not that. Because we are held to be morally responsible for what the choices we make, we are free. That is why we can be blamed, because we could have done differently. We could have made a different moral choice. Now, Tommy's question, a very great question is Gita saying that it is deterministic? What Gita says, Prakrite kriyamarani udai sarvani karmasha, makes a distinction between Prakriti and Purusha. Purusha is consciousness, the self. Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti is the primordial stuff. That is the equilibrium of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, the three fundamental ingredients, gunas, in Sanskrit that I pointed out, cognitivity, dynamism and affectivity. It is the perfect equilibrium, balance, out of which all these particular modifications and transformations emerge. And so, it could be misunderstood. Sanskrit is a tricky language, like other great classical languages. As Quine and others have argued, there is an indeterminacy in translation anyway. It is very, very true of even from Greek to translating into English. It's dangerous. When Aristotle is translated, even the best scholars of Aristotle, they have not always done a good job. Protasis menunes tu logos, tinos kata tinos, apophatikos e kataphatikos, has been translated by even a great scholar like Barnes. There is, as a classicist, Jonathan Burns, absolutely, as a premise, protasis, wrong translation. Protasis should not be translated as premise. Why? Not only the premise, but the conclusion also is that, logos, tinos kata tinos, apophatikos, that is also that. It is still the affirmation or negation of something of something. Again, Burns says, something of something else. That's not the Greek. Tinos kata tinos does not say something. It is usually, yes, when you say in Greek, tinos kata, you do mean in ordinary Greek something else. Aristotle is not writing as an ordinary Greek person. He is writing as a great logician. For him, tinos kata tinos does not necessarily mean something of something else. This has caused such a problem for the entire Aristotelian logical, by ignoring the actual words of Aristotle. Because they then said the subject and the predicate have to be different. No, that is not Aristotle's view. I have gone through the Greca Commentaria in 36 volumes, not all of them, but many of them. Still mostly untranslated. They knew better. Alexander, not the Alexander, the son of Philip. No, this is a different Alexander.
Aphrodisias.
Yeah, Aphrodisias. They knew better. They do not think that tinos kata tinos necessarily means of something else. So, these are just, Sanskrit is a much more difficult situation. This is happening with the best classical scholars in a language that is much better studied. Classical Greek compared to classical Sanskrit is academically much better studied. So, when we talk about Purusha, Prakriti and so on, translation is a very serious factor there, and how it is being misinterpreted and misunderstood. Prakriti means what? Prakriti. Kriti. Pra means like pramana, which means, mana means knowledge, pra means excellent knowledge. So prakriti, that prefix pra means what is more important, what is more crucial, prakriti. So that means nature. That means the inner core. Prakriti means the inner core, the foundation. How can it be deterministic? It is flowing from Prakriti. This is what Gita is saying. But if you look at Western Indologists, they will give you a quick translation and forget about. And I'm sure this is happening with translations of key, Arabic texts. Of course, my Arabic is too limited, so I cannot give you actually. But Rizwan Saab is here. He is the authority, so I will defer this to him. That is my response to Tommy's very pertinent question, that this is due to very bad and poor understanding of key concepts like Prakriti.
So 11:11. So
Yeah.
call it a session,
Yeah,
or
we will start with, let us have a